There is a kind of life most people live, and there is a kind of life very few ever reach. Most people live in reaction. They react to messages, they react to opinions, they react to problems, they react to emotions. They wake up, and immediately the world begins to pull them in every direction. Notifications, expectations, responsibilities, noise. And before they even realize it, the day is no longer theirs. It belongs to everyone else. And this is where something dangerous begins. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, over time. They start losing themselves, not all at once, but slowly, one yes at a time, one distraction at a time, one emotional reaction at a time, until one day they feel something they cannot explain, a heaviness, a confusion, a lack of clarity. They are doing everything that still feel empty. They are busy but not fulfilled. They are active but not in control, and they don't understand why. But the answer is simple. They are not living their life. They are being lived by everything around them. But there is another way, a quieter way, a stronger way, a deeper way, the Stoic way, a way taught by thinkers like Marcus Aurelius. A man who had power over an empire, yet focused most on mastering his own mind, because he understood something most people never realize. If your mind is not under control, nothing else will be. Not success, not relationships, not peace. Everything starts internally, and everything collapses internally first. So this is not just a video, this is a reset, a return to clarity, a return to control, a return to silence, thinking, and quiet strength. Because when you learn to be silent, you stop leaking energy. When you learn to think deeply, you stop making avoidable mistakes. When you learn to win quietly, you stop depending on validation, and that changes everything. But before we go deeper, understand this. Most people will hear this and feel inspired. Very few will apply it. Even fewer will change because of it. Because change is not in listening, it is in discipline. So if you are serious about becoming stronger mentally, subscribe to this channel to get more of this. Because what you are about to learn is not common advice. It is a different way of living. 1. Speak less than you know. Most people underestimate the power of silence in conversation. They believe speaking is how you show intelligence, how you show confidence, how you show value. But in reality, overspeaking does the opposite. It exposes you, not just your thoughts, but your emotions, your insecurities, your impulses. Because every time you speak unnecessarily, you are revealing more than you intend. You are giving people access to your internal world without realizing it. And once that happens, you lose control of how you are perceived. The Stoic mindset is different. It is not about speaking less out of fear. It is about speaking less out of control. Control over timing, control over emotion, control over meaning. Because words have weight, and if everything has weight, then not everything should be spoken. Think about the average conversation. Most of it is not necessary. People repeat themselves, people over-explain, people talk to fill silence. But silence is not empty. It is information. It reveals comfort, it reveals confidence, it reveals awareness. And those who are comfortable with silence are always perceived differently. They feel calmer, more stable, more in control, because they are not rushing to fill space, they are not reacting to pressure, they are choosing. Now consider this shift. When you speak less, people begin to listen more, not because you demanded it, but because you are selective, and selection creates value. If everything you say is rare, then everything you say becomes important. But if everything you say is constant, nothing you say stands out. This is why restraint is power. Not speaking less because you lack confidence, but speaking less because you understand value, because you understand timing, because you understand impact, and over time, something changes. You stop reacting to every comment. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop trying to prove your intelligence, because you realize something deeper. People do not respect volume. They respect clarity, they respect control, they respect presence. So the question becomes, why speak just to be heard when silence already communicates strength? 2. Think deep before you act. Most mistakes in life are not caused by ignorance, they are caused by speed. Too fast to react, too fast to respond, too fast to decide. And in that speed, clarity disappears, emotion takes over, impulse takes control, and consequences follow. But if you slow down the moment, even slightly, everything changes. Because between stimulus and response, there is space, and in that space, you regain power. Most people do not use that space. They skip it completely. Something happens, they react. No pause, no reflection, no evaluation, and later they deal with the result. Regret, conflict, loss. The Stoics trained themselves differently. They built a habit of interruption. Not stopping life, but stopping reaction. Before responding, they think. Before speaking, they consider. Before deciding, they examine. Not for delay, but for clarity. Because deep thinking reveals what surface thinking hides. Surface thinking reacts to emotion. Deep thinking evaluates consequence. Surface thinking asks, how do I feel right now? Deep thinking asks, what happens after this? And that difference changes everything. When you think deeply before acting, you begin to see patterns. You begin to predict outcomes. You begin to notice emotional traps before entering them. And slowly, you stop living in reaction. You start living in intention. And people notice it, not because you are louder, but because you are calmer. Not because you are faster, but because you are more precise. Not because you are reactive, but because you are controlled. That is the shift. From impulse to awareness, from reaction to direction, from chaos to clarity. And once you experience that clarity, you will never want to go back. 3. Detach from the need for recognition. Most people do not notice how dependent they are on recognition. They believe confidence comes from achievement, from success, from status, from results. But there is a deeper layer underneath all of that. Because even successful people can feel empty. If their success is not seen, if it is not acknowledged, if it is not validated, and that is where the trap begins. When your sense of worth depends on recognition, you become unstable, because external validation is unpredictable. One day people praise you, the next day they ignore you. One moment you feel confident, the next moment you feel invisible, and now your emotional state is no longer yours. It belongs to reactions outside of you. The Stoics rejected this entirely. They built something stronger. Internal validation, not how others see you, but how you see yourself. Not how others respond, but whether you are aligned with your values. When you detach from recognition, something powerful happens. You stop performing, you stop exaggerating, you stop presenting a version of yourself for approval, and instead, you begin to act with clarity, with intention, with honesty. You work without announcing, you improve without broadcasting, you grow without needing applause. And in that silence, something real is built. something stable, something unshakable. Because attention fades, but discipline remains, praise disappears, but skill stays, recognition changes, but character does not. And when you understand that, you stop chasing eyes, you start building depth. 4. Control your emotions in silence. There is a moment in every human experience that determines everything. It is not the situation itself. It is not what happens to you. It is the space immediately after it happens. The space between emotion and reaction. And most people never use it. Something happens, and instantly they respond. Anger turns into words, frustration turns into action, disappointment turns into impulse, and in that moment, control is lost, not because they are weak, but because they are untrained. The Stoics trained differently. They trained silence within emo. Tian, not suppression, not denial, but observation. They learned to pause internally, even when externally things were chaotic. Because emotion is not the enemy, reaction is. Emotion is natural, but unchecked reaction is destructive. When anger rises, pause. When frustration appears, observe it. When stress builds, acknowledge it, but do not act immediately, because emotions are like waves. They rise, they peak, they fall. But if you act at the peak, you create consequences that last far beyond the emotion itself. Most regret in life comes from emotional reaction, not rational decision, words spoken too fast, actions taken too quickly, decisions made without clarity, and later, time cannot undo them. But when you create silence inside emotion, everything changes. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to choose instead of explode. You begin to observe instead of obey impulses. And that is where real control begins. Because emotional mastery is not about never feeling, it is about never being controlled. And when you reach that level, nothing outside you can easily destabilize you again. 5. Build yourself without announcing it. There is a subtle mistake many people make. They confuse talking with progress. They believe that speaking about goals is a form of movement toward them. But it is not. Most people announce everything, their plans, their dreams, their intentions, and for a moment, it feels satisfying. It feels like progress. But nothing has actually changed. In fact, something dangerous happens. The mind receives small satisfaction from speaking and reduces urgency to act. Because it already feels like something was achieved, even though nothing was done. The Stoic approach is different. They believed in silent construction. No announcement, no validation, no performance, just action, repeated action, consistent action, private action. Because real growth does not need an audience. It needs discipline, it needs repetition, it needs patience. When you build yourself quietly, you remove pressure, you remove expectation, you remove distraction. And all that remains is focus. Focus on improvement, focus on consistency, focus on becoming better than yesterday, not for recognition, but for mastery. And over time, something happens. Your results begin to speak for you, without words, without explanation, without effort to convince anyone, because evidence replaces explanation. And when that moment arrives, you realize something important. You were never building for others, you were building for yourself. And that is where real strength begins. If you're still here, You're not consuming this like entertainment. You're absorbing it like transformation. So subscribe to this channel to get more of this. Because most people will never move beyond words, but a few will build in silence. 6. Observe more than you speak. Most people underestimate observation. They think value comes from speaking, from expressing, from responding, from contributing constantly, but in reality, the most powerful position is often silence. Because silence allows observation, and observation reveals truth. When you are constantly speaking, you miss things, you miss tone, you miss intention, you miss patterns in behavior, because your attention is focused outward, not inward. But when you shift into observation, everything becomes clearer. You begin to notice what is not being said. You begin to understand meaning behind words. You begin to recognize patterns in people's behavior. And that awareness becomes power. Not power to control others, but power to navigate life wisely. You start to understand people better. You see who is consistent and who is not. You see who is genuine and who is performing. You see what situations are stable and which are not. And because of that awareness, you stop making blind decisions. You stop reacting emotionally to surface-level impressions. You begin to move with clarity. This is what observation gives you, not noise, not reaction, but understanding. And when you understand more, you need to speak less, because clarity replaces explanation. 7. Stay grounded in your own mind. The world is constantly trying to shape you, not intentionally always, but constantly, through opinions, through expectations, through comparison, through pressure, and if you are not grounded, you will drift, slowly, without noticing. You will start adjusting yourself to match environments, to match people, to match expectations, until one day you no longer recognize your own thoughts clearly. This is how most people lose themselves, not in one decision, but in many small compromises, small adjustments, small silences, small agreements that were not truly theirs. The Stoic way is different. It demands internal grounding, a stable center, a mind that is not easily moved by external influence. When you are grounded, you do not absorb every opinion. You do not react to every criticism. You do not chase every expectation, because your reference point is internal, not external. You ask yourself, is this aligned with who I am? Not, what will people think? And that one shift changes everything. Because now your decisions are not reactive, they are intentional. You stop being shaped by the world and start shaping your response to it. You stop adjusting yourself for approval and start refining yourself for clarity. And over time, you become stable, not easily shaken, not easily influenced, not easily distracted, because your foundation is internal, and anything built internally lasts longer than anything built for approval. 8. Win quietly. There is a type of success that does not need noise, it does not need validation, it does not need announcement, it simply exists. Most people are conditioned to share everything, every goal, every plan, every small win, because attention feels like progress. But attention is not progress. Progress is quiet. It happens in repetition, in discipline, in consistency, in effort that no one sees. And when you understand this, you begin to shift. You stop performing growth and start building it. Winning quietly means you are no longer dependent on reactions from others. You are no longer waiting for approval to feel accomplished. You are no longer measuring success by visibility. Instead, you measure it by change. Internal change, skill improvement, discipline improvement. Because the truth is simple, if it is real, it will eventually show. Without forcing it, without announcing it, without asking for attention. And when it finally becomes visible, you don't need to explain it, because your results already did. This is the final stage of Stoic discipline. Not loud success, not performative achievement, but quiet mastery. Most people will hear this message and move on. They will feel inspired for a moment, then return to noise. Return to distraction, return to reaction. But a few will stay with it. They will think deeper, they will act slower, they will observe more, and they will begin to change. Because real transformation is not emotional, it is behavioral, it is repeated action, it is quiet discipline, it is consistent control. And if you apply even a small part of this, your life begins to shift, not instantly, but inevitably. So now the choice is yours. Continue reacting or begin observing, continue seeking noise or begin building silence, continue chasing validation or begin building mastery, because one path leads to distraction and the other leads to control. If you are serious about becoming mentally stronger, calmer, more disciplined, more in control of your life, then subscribe to this channel to get more of this. Because this is not just content, it is a way of thinking, a way of living, a way of becoming someone who no longer needs attention to succeed. And when you reach that level, you don't just win, you win quietly.